Dr. Joanie Connell, thank you for joining the podcast and congratulations on being the president-elect of SCP.
Oh, thank you, Liz, current president of SCP.
I don't want to tell you yet, but it might be less fancy than you've been led to believe.
Uh-oh.
Well, welcome. I'm really glad that you're here, and I'm glad we get a chance to have a chat and get to know each other a bit more.
Me too. This is actually really good. I wish we had more time together, so maybe we'll make that happen.
We'll definitely make that happen. I usually start these off by asking how we know each other, because it's always interesting to me to hear other people's experience of our first meeting. And sometimes the memories are similar and sometimes they're different. So I'm curious, how do you remember how we met?
Okay, that may be difficult. We probably have run into each other at conferences and things. Okay, but the first time I remember really meeting you was when I set up a call with you because you were president-elect, and I wanted to recommend a speaker for our 2026 conference. And get on the call, and you just started telling me about your ideas for the conference, and my jaw just dropped. I was just like, wow, these ideas are so far out there, and I was just so energized and intrigued by you. I mean, first of all, Las Vegas, Vegas, baby. I was like, wow, I like this woman. Right from the start. And you just totally shook up the model for the conference and brought in very innovative ideas. And there are more. I don't know if I want to spoil any of them, but it was just really exciting to me. And so then we ran into each other at the last conference, and it wasn't even planned. We just had this ad hoc meeting, and you told me even more ideas for the conference, and I just couldn't believe it. So your creativity and innovation and bold way of leading with new ideas just really inspired me.
Wow, thank you. I remember meeting you. It wasn't particularly formal. I remember our first chat was in the kitchen of the Airbnb that the society had. I think it was in Minneapolis.
Mm-hmm.
You had given a presentation. I had only been able to catch the tail end of it, but I was really inspired. It was extremely good. And I was like, I need to talk to her.
I do remember that conversation now. Yeah.
And we were hanging out in the kitchen, and I remember a few of us had started to try to put together like a meat and cheese board from the various snacks that we had. And we ended up having this like very fancy charcuterie lunch. And I just remember thinking, I am so fortunate to be in this group of people with very different backgrounds and experiences, all of whom are really passionate about people, relationships, organizations, and helping folks be better at being human. And that's how I've experienced the society. It's how I've experienced our colleagues in it. And it's continuously energizing for me. So I remember that. And then I loved that you set up the call. And then when we again chatted in Charleston this past February.
Mm-hmm.
And I've also really appreciated being able to watch you lead as you've come into this role now as president-elect, having had other leadership roles, and most recently as head of the education domain. And you've done so many things. Speaking of innovation, you've done so many things to just really revitalize that aspect of what we offer our membership and what we offer the market, which is meaningful, insightful, high quality, evidence-informed, research-backed education programs that equip our members to be even better ambassadors of the brand of consulting psychology. Very few people seem to know what we do out in the market, which is unfortunate, how we blend all of the different aspects of psychology theory and practice to support individuals, teams, and organizations in being their best. And I so appreciate all of the effort that you've put in on the education side. And I'm going to be the beneficiary of that this afternoon. So depending on when the podcast is heard, we have a town hall this afternoon.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll be having guest Erin Austin. She is an attorney specializing in intellectual property. And she's going to be talking about how we can use artificial intelligence when serving clients and what the opportunities may be, but also some of the pitfalls for the unwary. And I know you were an author of a book on consulting psychology in the context of technology companies. So it's exciting to me that we're able to bring this kind of content, very relevant, cutting edge, but also staying true to the roots of who we are and what our practice is about. So yeah, I'm excited for the leadership you've brought, and I can't wait to see what it is that you do over the course of the next 3 years in leadership in the society.
Yeah, I can't wait to see either. Starting to think about it now.
So there's so many things about you I'm curious about. Maybe the first one is, how did you get from Boston to San Diego?
Mm. Well, the snow drove me out. No, but seriously, I was an electrical engineering major in college. And so my first move was to Silicon Valley to be an electrical engineer. And that was my career. And I just remember I'd never been to California before. And when I arrived, it must have been early in the spring. It was just so warm and I could smell the flowers, and it was like snowy, a black snow that's all dirty after being around for a week or two in Boston. And I just fell in love instantly. And I've been in California ever since. Started up there, lived in San Francisco, went to Berkeley, and then moved down to San Diego with my husband when we decided to start a family, and we moved down here for lifestyle reasons.
Okay, that begs the next question. How do you get from electrical engineering to a PhD in psychology?
Well, I really was so much more interested in the people and the engineers than in the engineering, I guess you would say, back when I was an engineer. And how people work is really, I think, what drives me over the years I've learned. And back when I was an engineer, there was a lack of communication. People weren't really interested in showing up to meetings. Leaders were reluctant. It was kind of like you got the short straw if you got to be the manager, and it was like the only way up the ladder. So, it wasn't like people were motivated in that direction. I just was really curious about that. And it was also a similar time when, email and tech was really starting to get involved in how we interact with each other. So in addition to how people work, I was interested in how the technology impacts how we work together. And it was a long process of a career transition, but I ended up deciding to go back to grad school to study psychology to really learn how people work to then help engineers communicate better with each other. And that's essentially what I do.
I know you've continued to do quite a bit of work in the technology space, and you've even written a book about consulting with technology companies.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to hear about what you found that surprised you over the course of your career and the organizations and individuals you've worked with.
Let's see. That's a good one. My first surprise was how open people were to talking to me and how much my background mattered to them. That's just my personal surprise that was a door opener for me to have been an engineer. That I'm one of them, right? So I get how people think. Some of the surprises are that people aren't taking it more seriously how much technology is impacting human communication. We are, as a species, I think, just so much more reactive than proactive. And maybe that shouldn't have come as a surprise, but it's something I've learned over the years. And I've learned over the years, too, that a lot of the things I do are kind of on the forefront of frontiers of new ideas, and it takes a while to catch up. And it's hard to sometimes stay the course and not move on to something else that's new and interesting. So I guess maybe the surprise there is that people just don't seem to think it matters, and then we find horrible things that happen, like teenage suicide and all from social media, things like that. People at work, not getting along with each other during the pandemic because we're all remote and things like that. So that's something that when when you're very analytical and you see the connection, sometimes you think this is obvious, but it doesn't necessarily, like you just said a minute ago, it doesn't translate to everybody else and how they see it. And maybe they have different priorities. So sometimes that's a friction in my own mind.
I really appreciate that. And also the point about working on the bleeding edge of technology
Hmm.
and new ideas and just new tools. I mean, we talk about artificial intelligence, we talk about machine learning, we talk about blockchain, and there's just so many new technologies now. I'm curious, what parts of technology that you encounter through your practice are you excited about right now?
Mm. Well, let's see. I mean, I use AI. I use it in part to help me be more productive, but in part to stay up and current with what's going on out there and what others and my clients are using. But the things that excite me about it are twofold. I guess one is generating images. I mean, that's just so amazing that I can describe the image I want and AI will create something and even come up with some better ideas than I had. And another one would be, brainstorming, just helping me come up with some ideas for running an activity or something, but then having to flesh it out myself, because I need my human touch to add to it. But those are a couple things that I've been really interested in. That would be the generative AI.
What are you thinking about when it comes to advising your clients right now in terms of what they should be thinking about? What should be top of mind when it comes to integrating these technologies into their businesses and into their day to day lives?
I actually just published an article on this for the Consulting Psychology Journal. It's a passion, it's a driver for me. And so some of the advice in that one, I mean, really focuses on organizations thinking about, I mean, first of all, just being human first, human centric, right? Thinking about humans and how artificial intelligence can help and where it gets in the way and putting guardrails on. I mean, that's sort of like the basic concept of this. But instead of ha- implementing tools without thinking about how it's going to impact the humans. And we have the short-term effects and the long-term effects. I mean, it's actually the long-term effects are showing up even more short-term than we realize. I mean, there've been several studies just I've been reading them in the past weeks about people critical thinking ability dropping, when they're using, say, ChatGPT or one of the other generative AIs, and how people's language skills are shifting. And I don't know if they're skills, but we're starting to sound the same, more banal, using the same words and having AI choose which words we're using. And so these are the kind of things that I think we're using our uniqueness, maybe you would say, our uniqueness and our ability to really think about things and communicate with each other. And organizations need to be thinking about how they're bringing in these tools if they want to keep their workforce sharp. It's being proactive, it's putting guardrails up, and it's getting input and perhaps having some kind of review board as well to keep it going, because AI modifies on its own, which is kind of the wonderful thing about AI. If we don't think about that and keep checking, then we're going to run into trouble.
What are you most excited about right now?
I mean, I'm excited about that, but I'll change the subject for a minute because, something new and different that I'm doing isn't necessarily work, but it's the SCP president. And that is taking the opportunity to develop my own leadership skills. I mean, I've led organizations before, and smaller organizations and clubs, and I've been a leader in bigger organizations, but being the person at the top of the organization, and I think will cause me to have to not only think strategically, but also work on the diplomacy and those kind of skills, which is what I'm always advising my clients. The politicking and everything, because SCP is Division 13 of the American Psychological Association. So even though it's president of one division, there's still the larger organization, which tends to have its way of doing things. And so, just being able to navigate those different roles, I think I will certainly be hoping to learn from you, Liz, how to do some more of this. But that's an opportunity because, when you're working with clients and helping them, it's always good to have the true empathy of knowing, the challenges that they're going through and knowing what it takes to make a change in yourself to move forward and develop and be better at it.
I appreciate that. I'm excited for your leadership and the society to take on this new level as well. And I have to say, I think that it's the best volunteer job in the world.
Ooh,
I
interesting.
I have loved so far my experience being president of SCP. I'm still really humbled and very honored that I was selected by the membership, especially as somebody who in other settings would be considered early career as a consulting psychologist, certainly not early career in other aspects, but in this one. And so what I found that is so gratifying about it is first that it's an opportunity to really give back to our profession. A profession that's not always well understood in the market. And as a professional association, we have an obligation to our members to be out there in the market defining and enhancing the brand of what it is to be a consulting psychologist, what it is to take the different theories and frameworks of psychology broadly and apply them to individuals, teams, and organizations to help them be their best. And that's an incredible gift that we bring to the world. And then on top of that, the ability to equip our members to be the best ambassadors of that brand. And it's something you've been doing through the education domain in spades, helping our people to be able to deliver for their clients and achieve success as they define it for themselves. And then to do that in a way that makes our society sustainable so that we'll be here for generations of members to come, so that we're able to raise up people to become leaders in our profession, to identify our profession as something that they want to do, that they feel is a calling. And something I am excited to get to touch on when I give my address at APA convention in August is how consulting psychology is also a wonderful place for those of our healthcare psychology siblings to find perhaps new energy and new excitement at different points in their career. For those who practice in healthcare, it can be very challenging. The rates of burnout are high, and it's hard to just retool yourself and switch careers midstream. And so what we offer is a way to not have to do that. You can take all of this education and experience that you have in psychology in the healthcare therapeutic clinical setting, and you can find ways to apply that same knowledge in new settings. And that's part of what the education that our society provides does, is it helps people to make those connections between the research-backed, evidence-informed practices and how they affect individuals, teams, and organizations. So it's a great opportunity, I think, in our profession to be able to lead for psychology broadly and to continue to reinforce in a world that right now often feels like it's trying to discredit our profession or dismiss psychology. To be able to demonstrate how what we do really serves people, not just at the level of mental health care, but also in their work. Because when you think about where you spend most of your time as an adult when you are not asleep, it's at work. And making work environments better and helping people to enjoy their work, to get more from their work, to have those environments be healthy. I mean, that's really incredible. So I love being able to represent our society and be able to get out in the world and talk about what it is that we bring, what we do, why it's valuable, and frankly, why everybody should want a part of this.
I love it that everybody should want a part of this. I guess some of my goals, even in starting out in this career, was to help people develop better for the workplace, but also help the workplace develop better for people. So I work on both sides of that. And like you said, helping organizational leaders understand how to make it better for humans, because we are spending most of our lives there. Why not have a good time, and actually not hate your job? And that's actually something that comes up a lot with executive teams. I work with executives, and I mean, I've got some teams where literally you talk to each person individually, and each one of them has one foot out the door. They said, I just hate this job. We're fighting all the time, and like, well, why do you stay? Well, we're doing good work. I think we can, get good work done. And, I try to help them build the trust and reduce the conflict just so they can have a better day each day, in addition to helping the organization. But boy, what a difference it makes when you love your job and you like the people you're working with, and it's a good place to be.
Joanie, I'm curious, what is something that is important to you that other people know about you that they might not gain from just seeing your CV or how your profile shows up on LinkedIn?
Ooh, what's important, huh? Well, I'll tell you something. I was thinking about some of this before the podcast, and I was thinking like something that doesn't show up very often, and this is kind of a crazy thing to throw out there, is that I have a sense of humor. And I love to laugh. And the reason I hesitate to bring this up is because the first thing you say is, "Oh, can you give me an example?" And I'm going to say like, "No," because I can't come up with a joke like in the moment, but just having a fun time working with people is something I like.
I wonder, how do you find humor showing up for you in your practice?
That's a really good question, Liz. Well, I tell you, one of the things about humor that I think is so important is to have a sense of humor about yourself. Because sometimes we take things so seriously, and sometimes we can be just so self-critical, when we don't succeed at something, or we don't think we succeed, even though everyone else told us we did an amazing job at something, and we're still criticizing ourselves. Or we make a mistake, and it's okay. Helping others see that too, that they can have a sense of humor about themselves, and modeling it, I suppose. Time and place is everything, like you said, Liz. How it shows up in my practice often is with the teams I work with, and in terms of just getting along and doing things together. But with actual coaching and with clients, presentations comes up a lot. Now, this is something that just sort of happens, I guess, naturally, because I don't plan it. Like you said, planning humor just flops for me. So I have to just start talking, and I've learned to be very careful about what's appropriate type of humor and what's not. And so usually it's just what as things go along, it might show up.
I appreciate that. It's funny. My daughters are entering the very early teen years, and my older one in particular is very, very funny. And one of the things that we have worked on with her as she's cultivating her humor, which is just marvelous. She is so funny. It makes me very proud. One of the things that we've been working on is recognizing what our humor is aimed at. And it's one thing if we are laughing about something along with someone, and it's a different thing if we are laughing at them.
Absolutely.
And the distinction that we try to draw with our humor is that our humor is directed at situations, it is directed at events, it's not directed at people. And when we appreciate that people are not to be laughed at, but situations can be funny. So so for example, something may get dropped at home, taking dishes into the kitchen after dinner, and something gets dropped, and it's just sort of a comedic moment. And we're laughing at the moment. We're not laughing at the person who dropped the dish. And being able to distinguish between that is something that has been important for us sort of even more broadly, because it also translates into how we talk about situations, how we try not to talk directly about people, and respecting that we don't laugh at folks. And if they're not laughing too, then it's not appropriate for us to be aiming our humor at them, because then the humor becomes a weapon, and it shouldn't be. And it's always interesting to me to see how in organizations people interact with humor. If it's something where it's funny because it's something that affects the whole group, and therefore they laugh about an organizational quirk, or the humor is directed at individuals. And those are the places that I know are not great workplaces, generally speaking.
Yeah. Yep. One thing that I stay away from is what I call, well, maybe it's critical humor, but mean humor. And there's so much of that out there now. If you look at TV and you look at movies, that's what people think is funny. And that worries me, that people are seeing this as being funny. And even with younger people's shows, like I saw this with my daughter, with the preteen kind of shows, and I was like, but they're laughing at each other, they're being mean to each other. That's not funny. And that's something that I feel like when we see so much of that, it gets brought into other contexts, and people learn that as actual behaviors that might be acceptable. And that, I mean, I don't know, that's not a mission that I'm fighting right now, but I definitely see it as something that ought to be dealt with to be nicer. And I guess in organizations, we try to keep that by working on the organizational culture, the team culture, and some of the ways that I do that with teams would be, just at the outset, how do we want to treat each other? How do we want to be in a team? And humor can be part of that right at the upfront. That's what we call it, a team alliance. How do we deal with sense of humor? And if somebody is feeling bad, how do they speak up and make that known?
Yeah, helping people to speak up, speak out, and also to feel heard, to helping
Mhm.
also helping the people around them to hear them and hear messages even when they're not easy messages to hear. What's on the horizon?
Well, I actually have a chapter that was accepted to be written with some other authors, co-authoring it. We're talking a bit about the potential future directions of AI. We're talking about, sort of the utopian idea, the dystopian, and the most likely. And I was fortunate enough to get the dystopian look, so we might be looking at some sci-fi in there as well to get some ideas. So that's one of the things I'm working on. Hopefully, it won't end up being that way, but it might be good to think about.
You volunteer distribute.
Yes.
Who do you most want to be talking to right now?
Who do I most want to be talking to? Well, funny people, right? We talked about that, but maybe more seriously, I really want to be talking to other technical leaders. I mean, of course, clients, people who want to develop people skills, but more importantly, technical leaders and perhaps other leaders who want to design humane technology. That's something that I'm really focused on right now in terms of how do we do this in a way that helps people, not harms them or mitigates harm. I mean, there's not something that's going to be perfect, but people who really want to look into how to do that.
Well, Joanie, thank you for taking the time to join the podcast. Thank you for your friendship, your support as a colleague, and soon being part of the leadership trio. I couldn't be more excited for you or for the society. And I look forward to not just seeing what you do, but also how you grow and all that I'm going to learn from you. So thank you.
Thank you, Liz. This has really been a pleasure. I really appreciate you doing this for me.